Hey everyone, it's great to see you all again. Do you ever find yourself in a situation thinking that your focal length is just a little bit too much, or using a telephoto lens and you wish you could just zoom out a little bit to give your composition a little bit more breathing room? Well, you're not alone. Recently on my trip to Yosemite National Park, I pretty much had my 100-400 lens on my camera the entire time. So while I was shooting some telephoto images at tunnel view for sunset, when some beautiful clouds and some nice light came over Yosemite Valley, I wasn't able to get an entire shot of the valley without taking out my wide-angle lens, is what you may think. But in today's video, we are going to explore a super simple technique that essentially allows you to take wide-angle photos with any lens that you own. I hope you all enjoy. Now, the technique or type of photo that I'm referring to is a panorama. And a panorama is when you take multiple photos of the same scene side by side, either horizontally or vertically, and stitch them together to create one wider or taller image. In turn, this technique not only allows you to create a wider field of view, but because you're stitching together multiple high-resolution photos, you're able to upscale your image without losing any quality. Now, that being said, depending on the focal length that you choose to shoot your panorama, the proportions aren't going to be the exact same as if you were shooting a single wide angle photo. For example, this is the final panorama that I ended up taking. This is of Yosemite Valley in Yosemite National Park, of course, and it's actually made up of 11 different photos, all shot at 100 mil and vertically. And as you can see, I just took multiple photos panning across the scene, overlapping each other by about 20 to 25%, maybe even a little bit more, but that's also overkill, and stitching them together to create one long panoramic image of the entire valley. And as I was saying, the proportions are going to be a little bit different depending on the focal length that you choose to shoot. For example, this was shot with a telephoto lens. The background's going to look a lot bigger in proportion to the foreground if you were to just shoot it with a wide angle lens. And as I was mentioning, if I zoom into this photo, the quality even zoomed in all the way to peak of El Cap here, you can see that the detail was completely retained through the 100 millimeter vertical image here. I'll just go through the entire scene and I get complete sharpness and complete upscalability throughout the entire scene. As you can see, especially if we zoom in to El Cap over here, you can see the detail was completely retained. And if you were to take a wide angle photo, depending on the megapixels of your camera, mine I believe is 24, I'm using a Sony a7 II, I'm not going to get that amount of detail if I were to just take one single wide angle image. So how do you achieve a panorama image? Well, it all starts on location. What you're going to want to do, whether it's vertically or horizontally, position your camera on usually a tripod or something sturdy, or just rotate your wrists as you shoot the photos. And what you're going to want to do is that you're going to want to start at one end or the bottom and shoot all the way over, overlapping your images by about 20%, whether that be horizontally or vertically. And I shot all of these photos vertically with my 100 mil, but you're able to shoot them horizontally as well if you'd like. The reason the tripod's going to make it so much easier is that you have a single pivot point. If you're using your hands or just hand holding, you're not exactly going to get the same pivot point throughout the entire scene, whether that be horizontally or vertically up and down. So using a tripod allows you to move the pivot point perfectly the entire time. So let's jump into Lightroom and show you how this was done. So first you're going to upload all of your photos into Lightroom and select the first image, and then hold down Shift and click on the final image. This was a 10-shot panorama, and then you're going to right click and go up to Photo Merge and then Panorama. Most of the time, Lightroom's going to do a great job of stitching those photos together, especially if you were using a tripod and the same exposure settings. You want to make sure that you're using the same settings throughout the entire scene. And using manual focus will help you retain the focus point throughout the entire scene without having to refocus things. And it'll just make it easier when post-processing so you don't have different focus points throughout the scene. So as you can see, it did a great job. I had it auto-align And also these are the auto settings, but I can turn those off. And if we look at the settings here, so if we look at the settings that it gives you here, the first one is going to be select a projection. That is going to change how the panorama is stitched. So it's like if you were to take all of your photos and wrap them around either a sphere, a cylinder, or for perspective, that is going to make all the lines straight. So that's going to be really nice for real estate or architectural photography. But for landscape, I usually stick to cylindrical. It just usually creates the best proportions throughout the entire scene. And then as far as filling the edges, that just uses content aware fill and fills out the edges since it had to stitch them together. Most of the time it's just a little bit, and it does a really nice job most of the time as well. So as you can see, the fill edges, this did a decent job. You can't really tell, especially because it's really dark and just blank sky up here. And then auto settings, if you don't know where to start with editing the photo, auto settings is going to adjust the basic sliders for you. Sometimes it does a really decent job. For this one, it's a little bit bright. I would go back and adjust those, but I usually don't do auto settings. I like to edit from the start. But if you need somewhere to jump off to, this creates a great base for you and to adjust the settings. And then I also like to create a stack. So if we go ahead and merge that, it won't take very long, and it's just going to stitch all those together and create one fully panorama image. Now there are a couple reasons you would want to create a panorama. One, like we talked about before, is to create a wider field of view in your photo, whether that be wider horizontally or wider vertically to create a more wide angle feel to your image. Another reason, again, like we talked about before, is to achieve the ability to upscale your photo. Like I mentioned before, the resolution of this photo is going to be way bigger than the original if you were to take a single wide angle photo, because you're stitching all of those bigger images together. And another reason is for artistic choice. If wide angle photography creates some sort of distortion that you don't really want in your photo, try vertical panorama or sideways panorama, and then play around with the cylindrical, the spherical, and the perspective proportions and see what you can come up with. But as you can see, this is the fully stitched image. It did a great job, and as I mentioned before, the detail is retained throughout the entire scene, and this is going to create a completely separate DNG file, so you're able to go and so you're able to put your edits on, your masks, all of your basic settings, your tone curve, the detail, and all of the settings you would like to edit your photo with. But thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all learned something from this week's video. If you haven't checked out my vlog from Yosemite, I'll have it linked up here. I'm going to be starting to switch my channel from a tutorial channel to more of a vlog channel. I really like making those, and it seems like you all enjoyed them as well, just to show you kind of what I think on location, and then I feel like I can be more creative on location if I'm teaching. I also think that it's more of an interesting type of video as well as more unique. But if you could subscribe to my weekly newsletter, I would greatly appreciate it. I'll be sending out weekly updates as well as new galleries and prints on my website. I know the Yosemite and a couple other galleries are out, and I'll be building on that as much as I can and as frequently as I can. And then for daily updates, if you could just like and follow my Facebook page. But other than that, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.